Hello. Today we are coming to you from Mining Indaba 2022, and with me I have Olivier Binyingo, who's the Vice President of Public Affairs for Ivanhoe in the DRC. And we're here to chat about the recent developments by the company. Olivier, firstly, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Exciting times ahead in lots of aspects when it comes to Ivanhoe Mines in the DRC. So let's start with Kamoa-Kakula. Now, you started production last May, ramped up to phase 2, and now moving into a phase 3 expansion. Can you give us an update as to how those developments are going?
Yeah. So exciting times ahead, but also already very exciting times, especially the last year or so. As you mentioned, we entered into production in May 2021 with Kamoa-Kakula, with basically initially 2 mines plus a concentrator plant with a throughput capacity of 3.8 million tons. Now, very recently, we kind of been able to double it by adding an additional concentrator plant, again with a design capacity of 3.8 million tons. And there we started basically commercial production in April, the 7th of April of this year. So combined, that means 7.6 million tons of design throughput capacity. Now, phase 3 is really moving very quickly. So engineering has progressed significantly. Early works have started, and phase 3 will potentially be even more exciting than phases 1 and 2, if at all possible, because we will add 2 additional mines, Kamoa 1 and Kamoa 2. So in addition to the Kakula mine and the Kasoko mine that already exist and are producing, we will add a concentrator plant at a different location, and where initially the intention was to again replicate phases 1 and phases 2 to go to 3.8 million tons. This new concentrator plant will be bigger in size and will have a design capacity of 5 million tons. In addition to that, in parallel, we are also debottlenecking phases 1 and 2. So whereas we initially were going to get 7.6 throughput out of phases 1 and 2, by Q2 of next year, that will be augmented to 9.2 million tons. So all of that combined, so when phase 3 is complete, that means that we will basically have a capacity of more than 14 million tons per annum, which translates into 600,000 tons of copper that we will be producing, and which puts us in the 3rd spot worldwide in terms of copper producers. And that is still not the end of the story. So there's still a phase 4 coming after that. And we have already our eyes on the 2nd spot of world rankings in terms of copper producers. Very importantly, in addition to the ramping up of mining plus the concentration plants, there will be also a smelter that will be built, and again that will come online around the same time as the 3rd concentrator plant. And it will be the biggest of its kind in the world, with a capacity of 500,000 tons of copper. So there's a lot going on. A lot has been done. There is a lot going on, and we are obviously very excited about the future.
Great stuff. I know there's a lot going on at Kamoa-Kakula, but let's turn our attention to Kipushi. Now, this is a legendary mine, and the company has decided to bring it back into operation. Firstly, why did you decide to bring Kipushi back online, and where are you with regards to progress for this?
So, as you pointed out, it's a legendary mine. So I think the excitement of Kamoa-Kakula is that it's a new discovery, and I think we can't point it out enough because it is really has a huge impact in terms of the additional value we bring to the country. I mean, may have time to speak about that later, but it's a new discovery. It's all new. It was in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. There was no infrastructure and so forth. Kipushi is almost the polar opposite, in the sense that it was a mine that entered in production in 1924, that was in production up to 1993, so basically for the better part of the last century. At the time, very insane copper grades, and also a zinc producer. And just before it stopped producing, the big zinc was discovered, and that is now basically the crown jewel of the mine. So when we acquired the project wasn't in a good shape. The underground infrastructure was there, but was completely flooded. So a lot of effort and time and money went into dewatering the underground infrastructure. That was basically phase 1. After the dewatering, we had to rehabilitate the whole underground infrastructure because obviously that was no longer useful. So again, a lot of investment and time has gone into that. And that has basically now been completed. An important recent milestone was an agreement that we found with our joint venture partner, Mines, which owns 32% of the project, basically on how we will now take it from having finalized the underground infrastructure to building the surface infrastructure and taking it all the way into production. So we had an agreement on the commercial terms earlier this year. There's still quite some paperwork to be done, but it was a very important milestone, and so now we're working hard on pushing to final agreements, but in the background we're also making good progress on offtake and financing arrangements, and basically we should be good to go fairly quickly. We've already started some early preparation works on the mining site, so that is definitely a space to watch in the months and years to come. With basically a 2-year lead time to build the infrastructure, the surface infrastructure, and to be able to produce zinc concentrate. And which would be, once we start production, Kipushi will be by far the highest grade major zinc mine in the world, with the first 5 years grades in excess of 36%. And if you look at the second highest grades that are around in the world, it's completely outrageous. So a very different project in Kamoa, but nonetheless, I would say almost as exciting. Different dynamics. Kipushi is a town, the mine is in the city center, so again, very different from Kamoa. So yeah, but that's what keeps it interesting, to have that diversity within the group, but still 2 world-class mines for different reasons, but world-class projects.
Absolutely. So let's look at the 2 mines, right? Is Kipushi more of a challenge to get restarted as opposed to Kamoa, which is a new project?
That's a very difficult question, and I think to some extent you should maybe ask the teams on the ground, and especially at Kamoa, because even though it is a huge success story, obviously it didn't come without effort, and this is now speaking about the last 2 years or so during the COVID pandemic, where some of the teams spent months and months and months in a row on site to make sure that timelines were met and that budget weren't exceeded. So that team has really deserves a lot of recognition for that. But even before that, because Ivanhoe Mines arrived in the DRC in 1995. So even though now it is seen as an overnight success because things have been moving so quickly, and each time the teams have been able to deliver before kind of the scheduled delivery dates, it is seen as something that moves very rapidly. But obviously lots of blood, sweat and tears have gone into the process before reaching where we are now. So it's true that now there is a pace, there's a lot of learning from the first phase that was fed into second phase, and that's why second phase went so quickly from the start of production to reaching commercial production and exceeding design capacity. And again, there will be learnings going forward. Now, Kipushi is different. It's a different setup. It's a different partner also, because at Kamoa the government is directly a shareholder, whereas Kipushi it's Mines. So those dynamics are different. I think from a social perspective, obviously the dynamics will be different as well, because it is in a town. It has a long history, and Kipushi was a bit the beating heart of the town. So now that things start moving and accelerating, there's obviously lots of hope, lots of expectations. As is often the case, the expectations may exceed what the project can do, even though the project can obviously bring a lot of economic revival to the town, and hopefully be a catalyst for additional economic activity. So I wouldn't be able to really say clearly whether the one is more difficult than the other. They are definitely very different, but from my perspective and my role, equally exciting.
Okay, great stuff. I want to touch on the benefits for communities and the country itself a little later. But I want to ask you, now Ivanhoe has committed itself to renewable energy, mining in a more sustainable way. So what progress have you made in this regard with regards to your mining operations?
So because obviously we have a project in South Africa as well, the Platreef project, where the situation is different and the realities are different. In the DRC and our projects, we are blessed with the hydropower potential of the DRC. So the DRC has an estimated 100,000 megawatt of potential, hydropower alone. Unfortunately, only about less than 3,000 megawatt of that has been installed, and even less is operational because of some of those power stations not performing in accordance with installed capacity, or sometimes having stopped completely. So electricity is a blessing in the DRC because it's hydro, and therefore it can be stable and clean at the same time. But it is a challenge. It has been a challenge as well because of the infrastructure not being able to keep up with the pace of the development of the mining sector. So, and because electricity is so critical to our operations, we have been very proactive, and we've been actively involved in being part of the solution in terms of electricity generation. The first project, which was a rehabilitation and modernization of the Mwalingusha power station, was finalized in August last year. So that brought an additional 78 megawatts onto the grid in partnership with SNEL. So the asset is still held by SNEL, so we did that in partnership with SNEL. And then in July of last year, we signed an amendment to the existing financing agreement that was in place to be able to bring the Group 5 at Inga 2 within that contractual framework. Which means kind of around the same model, again, partnership with SNEL, an asset of SNEL that was no longer producing, and that we will be rehabilitating, modernizing to bring an additional 162 megawatts on stream. So things have moved quite significantly. Recently, the EPC contract was signed with Voith of Germany, and we will have to keep up the pace with the other developments, because without that electricity, you can't run the smelter, you can't. So it's again, I didn't mention it as part of phase 3, but it obviously underpins phase 3 and the future development at Kamoa, and it also obviously will be able to benefit Kipushi, that will also have an increased demand in terms of power. So in terms of the source of electricity to power our operations, we are blessed, and we are proactively making sure that we can use 100% hydro. Now, in addition to that, and that is something where there's no clear timelines at this stage, will be to look at our fleet and to reduce our carbon footprint even further by bringing electric fleet for operations in Kamoa. So we are in kind of constant discussions with providers of equipment to see when suitable fleet would be commercially available to bring that also within the mines of Kamoa. So that will kind of really be the next step, but at least we are blessed with hydropower.
Good to know about that. Now, Olivier, there is sentiment at times in the mining sector that it's not easy to conduct business in the DRC. Yet Ivanhoe, as you said, is just rapidly advancing. Would you agree to that statement that says business is difficult in the DRC?
Well, you pointed it out as well. Ivanhoe is developing major projects in the DRC, went from discovery all the way to production in the DRC, a new project. So I think kind of a success story that has been developed in practice, that's maybe the best answer to your question. But obviously, the perception is out there. Obviously, it has not been an easy country to do business in, but definitely not impossible. But I think what is very important, and especially in a business like mining, is to take a longer term view. Because if you look at months and years in isolation, then obviously you focus on the problems that are in front of you. But if you now take a step back and let's say 20, 25 years, and you see where the DRC was at the turn of the century, in terms of security, where there was basically the country was divided in three. There were significant rebel groups and rebel activity on the whole of the territory. There are obviously still serious problems in the east, and we shouldn't underplay that. But it's not of the same scale in terms of impact it has on the country as a whole and on mining activity, especially in the regions where there's no such rebel activity. On the political front, at the turn of the century, we were also in a very different space, with a dictatorship, a very long transition towards elections. But now in recent times we've had a number of elections in succession, even though some delayed. We had a peaceful transition of power between an outgoing president and an incoming president. So even on the political front, again, if you take this longer term view, there is clearly a significant improvement. And then lastly, pointing out the economic space, and specifically the mining space, at the turn of the century there was basically a standstill in terms of production. And right now, and for the past 2 years, I don't know how many years, the DRC has been the first copper producer on the continent, consistently producing over 1 million tons per annum, and that is even before Kamoa came online. So I think it's important to put things into perspective, and then that is looking back. And now if you look forward, we are true believers in the stability, the increased stability of the DRC, and in the DRC as an investment destination, because the recurring theme globally, and that will not go away, is green energy transition. It is more and more becoming an obligation for the planet to survive, to be successful in that energy transition. And if you look at the DRC as a country and the potential it has on the minerals, obviously, lots of critical minerals for that transition, on the hydropower, the impact of the rainforest in terms of absorption of CO2, the DRC will always be a key country if the continent and the world wants to succeed in terms of energy transition. So challenges, yes, for sure. Easy, not always. And I'm not sure any place is easy. But in terms of longer term view, definitely very optimistic and bullish.
Great stuff. One final question, Olivier. You know, ultimately mining needs to benefit a country and its people. So what does your operations mean to the people of the DRC?
Yeah. So touching back or coming back to the fact that Kamoa-Kakula is a project discovered by Ivanhoe Mines. And that's very important because there's obviously a lot of projects out there and a lot of projects that definitely all have an impact on the economy, on the people of the DRC. But Ivanhoe's, well, Kamoa-Kakula is the first project in a very long time that is a new discovery. So basically, if the discovery wasn't made, we wouldn't have the 10,000 employees today that basically have a job thanks to Kamoa-Kakula, and of which more than 97% are Congolese employees. If the discovery wasn't made, we wouldn't have the enterprise development projects that we are creating around the mine with communities, setting up their community-owned businesses. I'll just take one example of a brick-making factory that was set up. Is 100% owned by members of the community and that are producing bricks that are being sold to the project, to Kamoa, because of obviously very important needs of the project. And there Kamoa kind of stimulated that project, provided initial financing, training, and obviously the first very important anchor client. So those type of businesses, and that's just to name one, wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for the discovery. Now, yesterday I had a very good meeting with a very young woman, entrepreneur, who reached out to me, and I didn't really know who she was. And she told me the story about her own business, where Kamoa-Kakula was her first, well, Kamoa was her first mining client. And she just went in with the skills she had and the courage she had, and she just went knocking on the door of Kamoa, trying to get an opportunity. And it wasn't immediate, but as soon as she got the opportunity, she said, each time we delivered, there was a new opportunity. And now a few years on, basically she's been able to grow her business thanks to that project. And that is really almost like the models we should be aiming for. So yeah, a lot of good impact on different fronts. And then maybe to finish off, the impact that probably is the most difficult to quantify is the impact that success stories, business success stories have on a country with not always the best perception in terms of investment climate. Because if such a project can succeed with such complexity, such scale, in an environment where there wasn't even a road before we started doing exploration, then I'm assuming that other projects, maybe of less complexity, should be able to succeed as well. So that's I think the aspect you can't quantify. Every single success story that you put out there is potentially one that generates a new one.
Great stuff. Olivier Binyingo, Vice President of Public Affairs for Ivanhoe Mines in the DRC. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Gareth.